Now the news, data shows 99% of all cervical cancer cases are linked to infection with high-risk human papillomaviruses, an extremely common virus transmitted through sexual contact. Although most infections with HPV resolve spontaneously and cause no symptoms, persistent infection can cause cervical cancer in women. In 2018, an estimated 570,000 women were diagnosed with cervical cancer worldwide, and about 311,000 women died from the disease. Good news is, when diagnosed, cervical cancer is one of the most successfully treatable forms of cancer, as long as it is detected early and managed effectively. Cancers diagnosed in late stages can also be controlled with appropriate treatment and palliative care. With a comprehensive approach to prevent, screen and treat, the ailment can be eliminated as a public health problem within a generation. We're now being joined by Dr. Dolly Wokeji, a general practitioner and health advocate who will take us through the ailment, the cause, prevention and care. Good to have you on Arise News as always.
Thank you very much.
All right, very good. For the benefit of the viewers, what is cervical cancer?
Well, cervical cancer is a cancer or malignant tumor that affects the female genital tract, precisely the cervix. And the cervix is just a hollow cylinder that connects a woman's uterus with her cervix. That's just it.
All right. How prevalent is cervical cancer here in Nigeria?
Oh, cervical cancer is a public health priority here because it's the second most frequent cancers experienced by women in Nigeria. So it's very, very important.
Wow.
So let's talk about the risk factors here now. So what are your thoughts on that regarding cervical cancer?
Oh, yeah. Risk factors of cervical cancer, because it is a cancer that's sexually transmitted. So the main one is having multiple partners. Another is early onset of intercourse. Another one is having a high-risk partner, meaning that you might be the faithful one, but your partner has other multiple partners. That one is the cause. And then another is cigarette smoking. And most people don't know that chronic cigarette smokers, their partners are also affected with this cancer. That's one of the high risks. And then family history, obesity, and having other sexually transmitted infections like HIV and chlamydia can predispose someone to having cervical cancer. Also, not forgetting malnutrition. You have to be adequately nourished for you to be able to fight this cancer because, like you said earlier, 90% of it is actually removed by the immune system if you have a competent one. Also, health conditions like diabetes mellitus and alcoholics who have immunocompromise can also come down with this.
Doctor, I would just like you to go briefly on the predisposition in terms of the sexual nature of how a woman can be able to be susceptible to this disease through sexual intercourse.
Yes. What happens is that cervical human papillomavirus, the main cause of this cancer, affects the outer surface of a woman's cervix. Okay. So if you happen to have a partner who has the virus, immediately they pour in the ejaculate into the cervix. The outer layer of the cervix collects it immediately. And it actually, the person can be affected shortly after the sexual activity. It can even be during the sexual activity, the person is already infected. That's how quick that's how quick it can happen. So females are advised to do, when you want to have any sexual exposure, please do well to have a barrier contraceptive, even when you're having oral exposure.
So we're talking about condoms here and other preventable,
Condoms especially because they are barrier.
Okay.
Yes, they are barrier form of contraceptive.
Very good.
All right, so what are some of the signs and symptoms of cervical cancer?
Oh, well, we have the early and we have the late symptoms. But most especially, the early symptoms goes asymptomatic. There's no symptom. That's why many people have it. And it can be there for 10 years, simmering until it now fulminates into a malignant tumor. But for the meantime, most people usually notice watery discharge, copious vaginal watery discharge, which can now turn to reddish or brownish discharges as time goes on. Later, it can also be when a lady feels uncomfortable down there. That's one of the signs. You see, it's not really very overt, so it can go unnoticed. You might think it's something else. Another thing is bleeding. It can have some abnormal bleedings which can come out as postcoital bleeds. It can also be bleeding after menopause, or for those who are still not menopausal, they will have heavier and longer menstrual periods. That's how you know that, oh, you now start to suspect, oh, what's going on here? Then you now go and see your health practitioner to know what is going on.
Very good, doctor. And if I may ask, are there other ailments? Because you talked about the issue of, those are the signs, but are there other ailments that are similar to cervical, cancer, as it were, but it's not actually until you do a test to actually confirm that that's what you have?
Oh, well.
Like we show the same symptom,
yes,
but not exactly.
A lot of gynecological issues come out with bleeding abnormalities.
All right, so the test will actually give us, a better understanding of.
Not really the test, but the screen.
Okay.
Yes, what we call the pap smear. Well, what we do in pap smear is to collect the outer surface, sample of the outer surface of the cervix, take it to the laboratory to screen if there's precancerous changes or cancerous changes on the cervix to let us know.
All right, let's talk about prevention, because of course it is well documented and also quite popular what you need to do to limit yourself from breast cancer here in Nigeria. But with cervical cancer, can you talk to us, how do you prevent cervical cancer?
Okay, we have first of all the primary prevention and the secondary prevention. Primary prevention basically is the vaccination. It is advised that this vaccination works better when you give it to girls who are not yet sexually exposed. So it is better when given maybe like 9 to 14 years, like the Nigerian government is doing right now, giving immunization to 7.7 million girls, which is very, very commendable. So that is the primary one, making sure they don't even come down with it. And then parents should also look out and have sex education with their wards. They shouldn't indulge in sexual exposure when they're not yet matured. Now, going forward, you now have the secondary prevention, which I now said is the pap smear. Every woman who is in the reproductive age, starting from 21 to 44 especially, should have this smear. At least every 3 years, once in 3 years, they should have that done. And another one is also just have your smear done, particularly. And then you should stop at women who are maybe like 65 to 70 years. Every 3 years, get screened. It doesn't cost much, and it's now the new way of doing the smear, because it used to be very painful, but now doctors have invented ways when it's not so painful now for you to do your pap smear. It's just uncomfortable. And when you do that, you can avoid yourself the problems of cervical cancer.
Can we delve a little bit on the efficacy of, the medications in terms of prevention, vaccinations?
Yes.
At the early stage, especially the young, girls, before they start reaching sexual maturity regarding this, how will it actually prevent? That's the primary stage.
Okay.
I'd like your thoughts on that as well.
Okay, the efficacy of vaccines, whenever it should come into the country, is basically the job of CDC. They should check that it is very effective before introducing it to the populace for them to take it. So for the government to bring it in, we believe that the higher WHO organization and the higher medical bodies have already vetted the vaccine, and it's good to be taken.
But do we currently have them in abundance here in Nigeria at the moment?
Yes, we do, and it's actually free of charge.
So there should be more of a public enlightenment regarding this
exactly
advocacy, as it were.
Yes.
All right, talking about treatment options as well regarding this ailment, can you delve more on that?
Okay. Now, cervical cancer is one cancer that, if gotten early, can actually be treated adequately, and it goes. Now, number one is, first of all, surgery. Surgery, you do it in terms of you want to remove as much of the cancerous areas as possible. Second one is you can do radiation using now heavy X-ray beams to kill the cancer cells. Thirdly is you can use chemotherapy. This one is using the medications to target the cancer cells and get it off. And then last but not the least is what we call the targeted therapy. We also use medications to target only the cancerous areas of the cervix and get it out of the system.
Okay. And as is, I think we've spoken about this, but more importantly, what do people out there need to know? What else? What other information do people need to know about cervical cancer for prevention? Okay, maybe it's more prevalent with women, but what do men need to know to also probably be on the lookout?
Okay. Men need to know that they also pose a risk for women to contacting this by smoking. Chronic smokers, their partners usually come down with cervical cancer. So if the men can know and just stay off smoking, the women will be better off for it. And then to the women, they should also know that cervical cancer has a very prolonged time, like 10 years. Yes, so it's an ample amount of time for you to go get checked and then do what you need to do to stay away from cervical cancer.
You just alluded to the fact that secondary smoking is even more dangerous when it comes to
Primary
things
smoking.
like that. Yeah, indeed. Dr. Dolly Nwokeji, General Practitioner and Health Advocate, I'd like to thank you for delving into the issue of cervical cancer and, of course, for coming to the show. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you so much.